Folks, we're joined today by Becky Willis. Becky, there might be some folks in our crowd here today um, who haven't met you yet. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Oh, first of all, I'm so excited to be here. I'm very proud of the fact that I have my idiotic mug ready to go. I've got my tea in there. I'm sorry, I'm not drinking coffee. I'm drinking tea. Um, so I live in Las Vegas. It is perfect weather now. If you ever want to come to Las Vegas, come this time of year. Don't come in the summer. I have been in L&D for more years than I care to say. A lot of that time, I started out as a French teacher, like a lot of us all. I started out there. And I still have this philosophy about translating things, thinking about learning as something where we translate stuff. I was at Hewlett Packard for about 7 years, between Hewlett Packard Enterprise, first in sales and marketing, and then came back in 2006 in learning and development, and was involved in executive leadership development and did strategy and all sorts of fun things. So um, I was the VP of engagement at Edcast. For those of you who don't remember Edcast, it was bought by Cornerstone On Demand, and it was an LXP, very ahead of its time. So into platforms, into learning strategy, and as VP of engagement, definitely into engagement. At this point in time, I'm the Chief Learning Officer for a little company called Tractus. There's our lovely logo. We help small and mid-sized companies with all aspects of learning, help them to select from all of the different learning platforms that are out there. We know that there's somewhere in the neighborhood of 700 out there. We talk to a lot of people who are saying, I need to upgrade my LMS. So we do a lot of that. We have partners. We've done a lot of research in that way. We help with learning strategy, and we also help with creating content, working with a whole lot of other partners and content people. So we do lots of fun things. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Oh, and we were having a good chat in the green room about technology and how big of fans we are, and then the technology went sour on us. So, so note to self:
Absolutely.
don't tempt fate. Don't fly too close to the sun in the future. Yeah. You've mentioned the word engagement a few times, and that's what we're talking about here today. I'll make the dumb dad joke. Engagement is not getting down on your knee in front of a learner and asking them to offering them a ring. Um, what do you consider, your own working definition of learner engagement?
I'm sorry, Teams just went on and off. So
Oh,
we're going to blame all this on Teams. I
we
didn't see
are.
it in LinkedIn. So yeah. Um, engagement has been really important to me. So one of the things when I was at HP, we had a lovely LMS called Saba. That also was bought by CSOD. And we had LinkedIn Learning. And in LinkedIn Learning, we had about 8% of the couple 100,000 people that we used actually used LinkedIn Learning. And we were spending a lot of money on it at the time. And it was a real problem that we were spending all this money and not getting any return on it. So we did some investigation. That was part of my job. And it turned out that people loved it, but were overwhelmed by it. And nobody ever said they loved the LMS. I just think I have to say that. There are some stats from Brandon Hall that says that 44 or 46% of all people are looking for a new LMS. Uh, so we did some changes. We made some technical changes. We did some things. We got within about 35% engagement, and then we started working on different things with different user interfaces. We added in LXP. We did all sorts of things. So um, getting more bang for your buck and actually having people use the system, that was the metric at the time. But at EdCast, we had an algorithm for engagement, and it was a whole lot more than just who's on the system, who's using it, who's not. That to me is the vanity metric. So uh, we looked at the social networking piece of it. We looked at likes. We looked at all those things that AI could track for us because there was AI in the background. And engagement took a whole different spin to me in there. It's not butts and seats anymore. It's really getting people to use the system and getting people to do what they need to do to grow and learn.
Mhm.
When I think about that too, and thinking about applying that, we hear this term, hey, I want to increase engagement and when I'm developing my custom learning too, which of course you've been involved in a lot. And, people talk about different types of things that they do to create that engagement. Sometimes there's a little light on measuring on there. But tell me a little bit more about some of the types of things that you have seen that have been effective or that people have done that were they thought this was engaging but wasn't really quite in the spirit of what the word is. I'll throw out an example that I still think of many years ago. It was an off-the-shelf vendor that I worked at a previous company with. They were a partner, and they were raving about their engagement in their course and how engaging it was and interactive. Their interactive came up multiple times. And as I went through the course, I was wondering where the interaction was. And as I realized, they meant it was interactive because it had very high polished graphics and high polished video and audio. The user didn't really do anything over 60 pages except answer about 3 questions. But that was, and I was like, that didn't really jive with me as engaging interactive. But I'd love to hear your thoughts and some of the things that you've seen and have done for folks to really bump up that engagement.
Yeah, thanks. I think of it more on a I definitely think about on a course level. So I've stood in front of classes. I've written instructional design, e-learning, things like that, and I have a few rules just for myself if I'm designing a course. Interactivity, real interactivity is important. Blended modalities is important. Uh, but I suppose what I didn't say in my introduction is that I have written a book on engagement. And it's kind of funny because it actually has ended up being a book on how to get people to do learning. The title of it's being put out by ATD sometime in the next century. I'm sorry, ATD, don't listen to that part. It's called the 7 Steps to Learning Engagement: How to Build Better Business Outcomes. So I think that last piece of it, the business outcomes, is really where we have to go. We are at a turning point. We're really at a crossroads from a learning standpoint. We're doing things very differently. We have AI now. We have all sorts of capabilities. We have tools like Domino that enable you to create things that are better. So one of the 7 chapters in the book is design. But out of the 7 steps, step 7. So we think about engagement in design. We think about it when we actually create content. But I think about it more in terms of what's the first thing we need to do to get people to want to do learning, to get funded so that we can buy tools like Domino. What's the first thing we have to do? We have to get executives bought in to what we're doing. And that's not happening today. The statistics are a little frightening. I I did a lot of research for the book, and um, Brandon Hall, I'm trying to think of the exact quote in there, but Brandon Hall, there was something like 70% of executives do not believe that learning is worth the money that they spend on it or worth their people's time. So now they've got AI. So, you can just have AI teach you how to do something. You don't need learning and development. So to me, the first step is to talk about business outcomes. The first step is to talk about success stories that you've had in learning and to get executives bought in so they actually fund what you're doing. And then from the top down, we move down there.
Yeah, I think of that and often have heard well, can't they just Google it? Of course, or now can't they just add Chat GDP of that? And even if they perhaps even like the learning there, can't we make it shorter so they don't have to spend as much time on it? Think about your book, since it sounds that we got most of the materials and stuff and close into there. Maybe you could share what are those 7 chapters and steps, at least, that you're going through. The first one being, sounds like, getting the buy-in. Of course,
Yeah.
sometimes folks don't have those success stories already. So
No, it's a process, and I really stress that throughout the book. But step one has to be executive buy-in. So one of the things that we did at HP and then at my customers at EdCast, and we do it now at Tractus, is to find an executive that believes in it. I was very lucky. I had a gig at a large technical manufacturing company a couple of years ago, and it was to help manufacturing onboarding. They were having a huge problem, and this was during COVID. They were having a huge problem with people joining as on the manufacturing floor, learning that they had to be in bunny suits and that they were working 12-hour shifts, doing really highly technical stuff. And we had everybody from people who had worked in auto manufacturing, so they knew what a screwdriver was, to people who had been scooping ice cream at Baskin Robbins. And we're like, Phillips Flathead, I'm not quite sure what that difference is. So we had to completely revamp the onboarding process. It was extremely successful in the time that we did it, but one of the reasons it was is because the head of one of the biggest manufacturing plants that had one of the biggest challenges was very pro learning. He was somebody who actually believed in it, had been through some great learning courses, had been taught to be a manager through the whole GE process. And having his endorsement, having his, it's okay, we can spend money, we can do this, we can, let me get you the resources for data analytics. Let me tie in our quality system. Let me tie in our safety system. Let me show what the business outcomes need to be in just onboarding that you can show and see what it was. So we created a fabulous program that I'm very, very proud of. And it was all with people who had idiotic mugs, I just want to say. But his endorsement, his belief in learning was what actually got us all the resources, that actually got us the data that showed the business outcomes, that showed that we actually did our job. So that finding that one person, that believer, that executive that does that gets you your first success story. Then you can work one by one to the other executives that will help out.
yeah, and it sounds like one, just in describing that audience, and I'm guessing part of that training was personalizing it for different levels or types of folks that were coming in, because I could see one size fits all as that classic classroom of one person who's completely bored, one person who's going too fast, and or multiple in there. But also onboarding, that makes me think of, I hear this feedback from folks saying, hey, our organization doesn't even measure, improvement, and other things, but onboarding's probably something that they do have at least the inklings of measuring in most organizations, how long it takes there.
Yep.
Are
Yep.
they successful? Do they stay, or do they quit, and those kind of things. So that seems like it might be a better first spot if you want to actually get some measurement to show the success, to build on the successes there. And I also wanted to ask you to comment on it. Kelly threw out this in the chat. I think of engagement as intellectual, emotional investment, and immersion. And I think of those same concepts. And I was wondering if there's some examples or thoughts, or if that falls into another chapter in your book.
That it does. And that I agree with Kelly on that. And that's in the design phase to me when we're actually designing it. So in this particular course, in this particular example, we went through a lot of iterations in terms of what we were doing. So you have, the Baskin and Robbins folks who didn't know what screwdrivers were. We had to create boards because they were working on electronic boards. We had to create practice boards. We had to create practice things where they weren't working on $1 million system. Yet they weren't hurting themselves. They weren't working with electricity that was, I don't know how many thousands of volts, et cetera. So the design that we went through, the fact that we had very senior instructional designers working on what people think of onboarding. It's like, well, I've done onboarding. We can all do onboarding. This was I was in charge of onboarding for a while at Hewlett Packard, and that was a whole different ball of wax. So doing it for manufacturing and doing on the job and all that, it was immersive. And then we had to dive into, once they're out of the classroom and they're on the floor, how do we get to them? And they were, it's like, please don't put me in a bunny suit. I'm claustrophobic. We had to think of all of those design things, but the first step was to get that executive body and saying, look, our attrition is terrible. We're not retaining people. We're training them, and it's taking us months and months to train them before they are independent on the floor. Safety is a problem. Our quality metrics are a problem. We know all of these business metrics, and being able to identify those. And instead of saying, in this course, you will learn, it is, as a result of this onboarding process, you will be independent within 2 months, as opposed to 6 months. Quality metrics for new employees will blah, blah, blah. Having those business outcomes is what convinced the whole leadership of the company to say, okay, we're going to do this in every other manufacturing place that we have, including Malaysia. Becky, you get to go to Malaysia. Yay. That was good.
That's an interesting thing, because I think to even still learning, I see today provides a nice intro. It says you will learn, or you are focused on these things and whatever else. And I haven't seen as often what you said of, hey, this is what's going to get to you in your job, which hopefully is important to you emotionally, as well as to the organization. And speaking of emotions, when you first said that bodysuit, of course, it's Easter. I heard bunny suit, but,
no, it is bunny suit.
It really
it
strikes
is.
how
Yes.
emotions are powerful to remember it. Yeah, and they do have a little bit of the ears.
Yeah. It's impressive in terms of what they do. But yeah, it's having business outcomes is the way that we need to think. We need to think like a business person. We need to have vocabulary that's different. And instead of talking about training, we talk about learning. I actually have 3 different tables in different places in the book where I talk about vocabulary that we need to have when we talk to leaders. This is also all tied up in what's been called the learning maturity model. Have you guys talked about that? I don't know, in previous
We haven't talked about it recently in an idiotic episode. So yeah, share just a little bit for folks who may have not heard of that before.
Yeah, so back in 2013, I think it was, Josh Bersin published what he described as where learning maturity needs to move. And it's very interesting because it's evolved. There's a couple of different iterations of it. The one that I love the most right now is one through David James. David James is the CLO now today for 360 Learning, but he was a learning leader at Disney. And I don't know about you guys, but I have an immense admiration for what Disney does from a training perspective, from a learning perspective. And David is one of those great geniuses who really thinks at a very strategic level. He talks, David James talks about the 5 levels of learning maturity. And through the five levels, the first level 1 is, boy, I'm gonna have to really think about this because I'm not David James. So the first level is reactive. So it's basically just doing compliance. And there is no engagement at that level, really, because people are doing compliance, and you know they love that. The second level is proactive, where you have the standard content library. And usually at this point, proactive means that they brought in one of those giant libraries, and leaders go, well, you have 30,000 courses. What more do you want? I'd like something useful where I could find something that I know really matches what I'm doing in my company.
Or time allotted to actually take them.
Yeah, little things like that. So the interesting part is between reactive and proactive, that the surveys that have been done in the past year by all sorts of different organizations, Deloitte and Brendan Hall, as well as 360 and myself, and some of the stuff that I've done for the book, 2/3 of all companies today are either reactive or proactive within the learning maturity model. So that's a little bit of why we have to think more at business outcomes. Level 3 is impacting. So you're starting to really do more of a top-down approach. You're impacting the business somewhat. You've been able to turn around, for example, an AI course to teach everybody what AI is. You're bringing in subject matter experts in there. You're doing collaborative and social learning. Level 3 is a big bump, and level 3 is a very exciting bump to get into there. Level 4 is strategic. So you're really thinking about the business outcomes, like, for example, working with technology companies. Obviously, AI is a really big, or a company like Deloitte or somebody like that, whose their whole product is their people. So getting their people trained for them is very important. So you've tied what are the business outcomes that you're trying to get to, and how do you achieve that in learning? And it's truly learning and not training. So level 4 is amazing, and level 5 is transformative, and that's when I think you start floating above water. Yeah. Transformative is skills-based organization. So that's, a whole nother topic. I have to say the research that I've done to actually create the book has taught me a lot, and it's also changed the way that I think a little bit about engagement and business outcomes. Having been a business leader, I was the head of sales and marketing in a couple of different organizations. Having been someone who wants to see that learning actually helps my people to get things done, I think about engagement quite differently. I think about this in terms of the learning maturity model. I would be so delighted with all of our clients. We're at this point trying to get them to level 3. Again, most of them today, we're working on strategies to help them, working with the executives to get them to level 3, and then up to level 4. But there are gating factors through all of this to actually get to in level 3, where you have SMEs truly involved as what I call champions, which is chapter 3. Then you have to have a learning platform that's not some old legacy dinosaur of an LMS. If you have an old LMS, it's going to be really hard to get past level 2 in the learning maturity model.
Now, you did a lot of research on this, and I know in the past when I've done research, I kind of fall into a couple camps of differences as like, wow, I'm really surprised about that in terms of, in your case, engagement, or other ones of, thank God I knew this all the time, that this really reinforced it, but I've not been able to articulate it or go ahead and say to folks in the right way. Has there been any thing like that you found in the researching and putting together the book there?
I think the biggest aha that I've had has been the role of the learning maturity model and the fact that where we are as a profession and where we need to be as a profession. We cannot continue to be order takers who the stakeholders come up to us and say, I need a course on. We can't continue to say, would you like fries with that? And how important it is now, especially with the technology that has evolved, to really adapt and adopt the technology and the concepts of business outcomes. That importance, that's why the title has business outcomes at the end of it. And honestly, I thought about changing the title, but ATD said, no, you can't do that.
Yeah, people care about that a lot.
Yeah, business outcomes to me is where we all have to really start thinking about learning strategy. We have to think about what are we trying to achieve and changing our evil ways.
We get a lot of conversations here on Idiotic about that shift from order taking, of being seen as a service bureau. Oh, I need 50 copies of this. Can you go run them off the photostat machine? Oh, I need an e-learning course on this or that. But so much of that requires even the first thing, that the champion, someone recognizing within the organization that something more than just order taking can be done to produce a result. So it almost feels sometimes like the hamster wheel or the endless kind of circle of trying to break out of the mold of what people expect us to be able to mature it into something, to be able to mature it into something that's different. Any thoughts on how folks can actually move in that direction?
Yeah, it's tough. It takes a transition time. It takes when that stakeholder comes to you, you're not going to say no. I mean, first of all, let's be clear. We're not going to say, oh no, I don't want to create a course. That's not what I'm going to do. It's and I have this I have a pretty big discussion about this in Learning Strategy, chapter 2. Somebody comes to you, and let's go back to onboarding for a second. Somebody comes and says, we're losing people, we're not retaining them, we have a problem with quality, we have we have these problems. I need a course. I need you to update the onboarding course. And great. And then you have to go and do your needs analysis. So I think what this changes is how we do our needs analysis, because we have to look at, instead of looking at how can we change onboarding, it's like, what are the problems? What are our solutions that we're trying to do? It's just a little tweak in your mindset, and getting the stakeholder to tell you those things, because they don't have the data necessarily, is going to be a little harder. But you have to dig into what are the business outcomes, as opposed to in this course you will learn.
Yeah, it almost seems like you have to kind of, just as we all do, pick and choose our battles. And as you're on that hamster wheel, you see one that has a potential of getting more buy-in, or they're already measuring some outcomes onto it, so you could tie some of your stuff to it there, that you have to kind of push harder on that way. I was also thinking of the flip side of what Chris just said. Now you got buy-in, you got it in there, and you're getting to the design phase in your chapter there. What are some of the things that you need to be showing up and doing in terms of engagement to make sure that you actually get to the results that you're talking about in there when you get down to the brass tacks there?
Well, one of the things that I really like to see happen is changing your learning technology. Having worked at EdCast, at 12 years ago, Degreed in EdCast and Fuse brought in AI, not the generative AI that we know and love today, but AI in the background that was, doing all sorts of data analytics. And when we showed prospects and customers that we could actually do true data analytics on what's happening in the background on your platform, that we could actually do social learning where SMEs were much more involved, where subject matter experts, were more than just somebody who wrote a bad course using a bad tool, where they actually did things like curation and stuff like that. The intermediary step is, I think, is important, is to have the right technology. So don't just find, if you're looking for a new LMS today, look past just a new LMS. Look to all of those products today that have AI incorporated in them. Look to the products that is an LMS and an LXP combined, because there's a lot of them now. There are ones that actually exist today. Or if IT is saying to you, look, this is who your LMS is, and it ain't going to change, then put an LXP on top of it. You're going to have more capabilities with that technology, with that investment. Again, gating factor. If executives don't see that those business outcomes, if they don't see that, then they're not going to necessarily invest in more technology in there. So hamster wheel, sorry. But
Yeah,
if
it
you've
seems
already
like,
already
go ahead.
said that you're looking for a new LMS, that you've already said we're going to make that investment, then do something besides just an LMS.
And it sounds like what you're saying is one of the big advantages of some of these other technologies approaching less of the AI that we all hear in our face there, is it's really providing a lot more analytics about what people are doing in there, and providing a lot more opportunity to blend different aspects of learning and social learning into it. Because we seem to vacillate going, hey, instructor led, all e-learning, sometimes mix in there. Thinking about, sure, you have that, perhaps bring that in. Maybe as your first step, you can't get that investment, as you said there. What are some things that you've seen that might be helpful for folks who are trying to nudge into that maturity model, but only have available right now to kind of make a difference with a self-paced course that they were designing?
Yeah, I'm a big advocate of blended learning.
Mm-hmm.
So having a self-paced course along with some practice, along with a simulation of some kind, having a little video that a leader or an SME does on their phone. Make it easy.
Mm-hmm.
Make it so that it's something that they can do. Use ChatGPT to help you to spend some of that time doing some of the investigation. And it's I don't know, have you guys used ChatGPT to design a whole blended course? Damn, it has some really good ideas. It can do some great, save you some time thinking about different ways of blending it in. I think the solutions need to be curated, blended solutions that are in there. And I do believe in microlearning. Sorry. Yeah. 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 Hallelujah. Amen. Paths, experiences, even the the dinosaur versions of LMSs today can do a blended path. Just please call it a path instead of a curricula. If we change our vocabulary to not think like school, to not think like education, and if we change our vocabulary to think more about, not say pedagogy, but say that word that it is for corporate learning. Please help me with it's, I don't want to ever hear the word pedagogy again, because that ped means child.
Yeah.
We're not educating children, we're teaching people skills. So
Well, and even you
lots
said
of
path, you're moving towards that. You're going to be on there. You're not graduating to this
yeah.
other level, or I've not. Yeah, so that is just a different way of thinking. It sounds like for what you're saying there, for the self-paced content, one, having a lot more where they're doing those things.
Mm.
And then whenever possible, I mean, always try to make it more realistic. Take advantage of some of the type of coaching capabilities. We had a great webinar with Wellbe a while back on that, where they to tie to AI into it, but also tying in little components where they could hopefully work with a subject matter expert or someone else who can provide them some feedback, either live, or it sounds like you're talking about like, hey, practice, and I've seen this in sales, practice a sales recording, and a human actually looks at it,
Yes.
and gives you some feedback on that particular component there.
Yeah, some of the new modern platforms can do some amazing stuff. You can self-report your skills. So let's say that you're a programmer in any language. There are levels that you have, and typical skill levels are been some debate on all of this. It can be anywhere from 4 to 8, but most databases, most skill taxonomies today have 8 levels of knowledge. So you can self-report where you are on that. And the new platforms can take you where you are. It can add your manager's input into that. It can even add 360 in some cases input about where you actually are in that skill profile. And it can say, okay, I have tagged these courses to this programming language, and this course is at level 1, this course is at level 2, and all that. All of those taxonomies are now done by AI in the background by the platform. And then you can have skill coaches that are being built into there as well. So these platforms, you would think that, to have all of these capabilities, it'd be a whole lot more money than, your dinosaur LMS. It's not. No, it's what's happened in the past year in terms of what they can do with a skills-based organization, how you can tie your courses into the skill levels and the taxonomy. There are tools to do a free skills taxonomy. We have clients that they're a 90-person company, and they're doing their skill taxonomy from a free course that's in there, free AI course.
Yeah, it sounds like back to even your beginning, one of the key takeaways I heard there was in that onboarding from the, as you said, Baskin Robbins to the people who are very experienced in there's, their skills and their content matching up to what them, where they're at. So they're not becoming disengaged because the contents are really not appropriate for their level of where they're coming in, but you're still getting that same results for onboarding.
Yeah. Yeah, I try not to talk about specific technology platforms, but it is so cool with some of the stuff that's really going on nowadays and what we've done from career development. So chapter 8 is career development, because what's it all about? People want to grow their careers. Now, when people think about growing their careers today, they think, well, I'm going to move up. There's not enough of that. To move up, people are moving out now. And companies really need to retain their people. They need to be able to show internal mobility, need to show where you can go with that skill. So again, back to skills being so important. If I'm a program manager in IT and I want to go into marketing because I think that's cool, they have program managers in marketing too. So what are your transferable skills, and what are all that? The skills taxonomies and the platforms that have all of that, that's all possible now. But you have to, as a company and as a leadership team, understand what the investments you're going to make are going to be in skills, and to become a skills-based organization. Not simple, but there are tools now that can help you with all of that.
It seems the tools now really automate, facilitate, because some of that stuff, as you know, has been around for a long time, but even less folks did it, quite frankly, because it was really, really hard. And it sounds like it's become a lot easier. You still have to do hard work for it there, but it's a lot more accessible for folks.
Yeah, we did when I was at HP. We decided we were going to do look at the competencies for HR. So we were part of the HR organization. So we spent a year coming up with competencies, job roles, all of that infrastructure that now, like Lightcast can do that in 10 minutes.
That's a world of difference there. I mean,
Yeah.
not too many folks would have invested the full year, but they're happy in investing, a few weeks or minutes.
Yeah.
Mm.
So that, yeah.
Becky, you've used the word skills a few times, and let's just check and see if my skills are sufficient to this time play us out with the music. Thank you so much for joining us this week. It's been an absolutely fabulous conversation, and thank you for your patience. Thanks to the folks joining us as well with your patience for helping us get started. Okay, guys, I'm going to try this.